Nazi Germany invented some of the most destructive weapons on Earth. Giant guns, high-tech rockets, advanced jet fighters, and one of Adolf Hitler's most secret weapons, the Fritz X, grandfather of the modern smart bomb, one of the last great mysteries of World War II. Could this bomb have changed the outcome of the war? Now, a German-American team of aviation experts resurrects the Fritz X. The crew undertakes a daring experiment far out in the California desert. Dropping 2 replicas of the bomb.
Watch the Fritz X, because we are definitely in a danger zone here.
To unlock the mysteries of Hitler's secret weapons.
Release. Gone. I felt it go.
The Harz Mountains in Germany, the scene of a brutal World War II battle. Today, it's a peaceful village, but one of its residents is an experienced model maker of World War II artillery. None of his neighbors knows that he works on full-scale replicas of Nazi aircraft and weaponry. Holger Bull is the mastermind behind these replica prototypes and is the son of a World War II German Air Force pilot. He reconstructed these suicide aircraft from blueprints drawn by Nazi engineers, hidden in archives for decades. One top-secret Nazi weapon puzzles Bull the most: the Fritz X, an early precision bomb that entered combat in 1943. Early testing revealed that the accuracy of this radio-guided bomb was over 80 times higher than that of conventional free-falling bombs of the time. Its first missions brought death and destruction in the Mediterranean. When the alliance with Italy failed, Adolf Hitler ordered bombing raids on the Italian Navy. And on September 9, 1943, the Fritz X was dropped on the Roma, one of Italy's biggest battleships. After 2 direct hits, the battleship sank within 35 minutes, killing more than 1,200 sailors. 2 days later, in southern Italy, the Germans targeted the cruiser USS Savannah. Again, the Fritz X hit its target, but this time, something went wrong.
The Fritz X actually came down and penetrated the roof of the number 3 gun turret and actually glanced off the breech of the center gun of that turret and continued down through the handling spaces and actually exploded in the magazine as it exited the bottom of the warship, which was actually a very lucky thing for Savannah, because had it been contained within the magazine and the magazine completely detonated, this definitely would have broken the ship in half.
The Nazis report that the warship, struck by aerial explosive, went to the bottom. But here, Navy pictures show the Savannah afloat.
The destructive power of the Fritz X proved so strong that it ripped through every battleship it hit. But it never exploded inside the ship, only upon exit or in the water. Was the bomb technically imperfect? Or did Hitler's engineers design a superweapon that only failed by being too good for its time? This is the Fritz X mystery. Now, more than 60 years later, Holger Bull embarks on a daring living history experiment to reconstruct the Nazi smart bomb and drop it in a remote desert area. Bull wants to test the replica's ballistics and its destructive power. This will be a first for him.
This, of course, is some kind of wonder weapon system also, you know, really fascinates me, and it's a goal for me to get it into the air, to make it airborne.
Wartime photos and sketches provide important clues about the bomb's shape. Today is the day Holger Bull starts building the Fritz X. At his workshop, he and his assistant assemble the parts. They are part of an elite group who produce full-scale models of World War II technology. Their first task is to replicate the main body of the initial bomb. They study the aerodynamics of the original Fritz warhead, which carried over 700 pounds of explosives. After a good start, the model makers soon face one big challenge.
For me, to produce the outlining, to produce the physical body of the Fritz X, the fuselage, the cross-shaped wings and all that stuff is not the big problem. But the problem is, for me, at the moment, the electronic, which is completely undiscovered.
Bull searches for an original Fritz X to better understand the electronics used inside the bomb.
Yes, Bull speaking. Is there a Pima Air Museum, Tucson, Arizona? Yes, I said Bull speaking. You are owning a Fritz X. Can I see?
Luckily, he finds exactly what he needs in Tucson.
Wonderful.
The team decides to move the project to Arizona, where they'll meet up with American model makers and aviation experts. Over 5,000 miles later, Holger Bull arrives in Tucson. He's here to join American reconstruction experts at the Pima Air and Space Museum.
Thanks for me to be here.
Holger, John Marchand, Director of Collections here at the museum. Nice to meet you.
It's one of the largest aviation museums in the country, and it holds a rare treasure. An original Fritz X, captured by the Canadian Army. Unfortunately, after the war, the electronics were ripped out. Still, the exhibit provides Bull with valuable data for his replica.
You know, having had only plans in Germany, made a couple of photographs, you know, I realized this thing will give us really the final push.
Joining Holger Bull's crew is Steve Wiper, a naval historian. He gives Bull a quick tour of the World War II weaponry.
This is their recently restored B-36 Peacemaker. This was the largest aircraft.
Yeah.
I mean, it is gigantic.
Conceived in 1941, the Peacemaker was designed for long-range flights from the U.S. to Germany.
I cannot recall the horsepowers, but it must be 10,000 of horsepower altogether.
But the bomber, which has a range of more than 8,000 miles, wasn't deployed until the summer of 1946, over a year after the German surrender. Work on the Fritz X continues in a special reconstruction hangar at the Pima Museum. For the outer skin of the Fritz X, they use plywood, which is flexible but strong enough to resist enormous air pressure. The team has less than 2 weeks before the test drop of the bomb is scheduled to take place. Meanwhile, at Chino Airport in California, a second team prepares an original World War II bomber to drop the Fritz X replica, a B-25 Mitchell. The B-25 Mitchell is similar in wingspan, length, and speed to the Dornier 217, used by the Nazis to drop the Fritz X. Back in Arizona, Holger Bull and his team work day and night to meet their deadline. A top-secret Nazi film captured by U.S. intelligence at the end of World War II has been discovered by historian Steve Wiper in the U.S. National Archives. This rare find provides the key to understanding the inner workings of Adolf Hitler's precision bomb, the Fritz X.
I believe this is a training device for the bombardier.
Yes, most probably.
The training device consisted of a bridge with a synthetic control system placed over the conveyor belt. In this synthetic training, the observer keeps the crosshairs of the bomb sight on the target by use of the control stick.
So here you see how much they were able to control the...
Yeah, it's interesting how they can actually steer it back down and almost upside down and back into the target.
Yes, yes.
The film reveals key pieces of the bomb's control system: a shortwave receiver installed in the tail section and an electric gyroscope in the rear.
The roll gyro prevents the bomb from rolling so that the signals maintain their orientation.
The gyro keeps the bomb in its basic stabilized position.
Right.
It must normally fit into a kind of metal shell. There it is, yes.
The captured film confirms the unique ballistic abilities of the Fritz X.
It would actually, to some degree, overshoot the target, and then the bombardier would actually steer the bomb back down onto the target. And I found that truly fascinating.
Careful how tight you get it, John. Oh, it's perfect.
Ready? That's the way you want to put it in. Okay.
Flush.
Did you find the right drill now?
The team continues to assemble the tail section of the bomb. The special box shape of the tail was critical for the unique ballistics and destructive power of the Fritz X. Just before the war, Hitler's engineers formulated this new design. But when dropped on a target, it turned out to be too fast.
The metal tubes prevented the bomb getting supersonic speeds, which would have been basically impossible to use the proper way, because it would have probably get through a target and explode deep in the water and without making any damage.
The tubes also functioned as radio antenna for the bombardier's signal.
Not so much left.
The team paints their bomb the pale blue of the German Air Force, the color used for the original Fritz X in combat. In less than 2 weeks, the crew also finishes a second replica bomb. They now have a backup in case something goes wrong during their initial test drop. Scheduled to happen in just a few days in a remote desert area. Adolf Hitler had a weakness for giant weaponry. In 1942, he gave orders to construct a heavy tank codenamed the Maus. But this Maus weighed about 190 tons. On seeing the prototype, Hitler personally insisted on increasing the gun's diameter. Today, in a restricted military zone located southeast of Berlin, we find the secret manufacturing grounds for the Maus prototypes. This is the first time a film crew has searched for the remains of Hitler's monster tank-making factory. The giant tank must have left giant traces. Finally, the discovery of the original construction hall of the Maus. And Hitler's engineers developed an even bigger tank. The largest tank ever designed. Decades later, Holger Bull discovers the blueprints for a Nazi monster tank. He takes a road trip to visit an expert to pose the question: could these giant Nazi tanks have turned the tide of the war? Peter Robbins has a collection of tanks and armored vehicles from the 1970s.
And the field gun is tracked, and it weighs only 20 tons. And in the case of the German heavy tanks, what is it, 100 tons or something?
The team heads to a site where Peter conducts exercises for the U.S. Army. Today, they estimate the size of a Nazi tank that would have been even bigger than the Maus. The Land Cruiser P-1000, which Hitler himself codenamed the Rat.
So I was able to purchase a couple of copies of drawings and photographs of these amazing, monstrous German tank designs. This is the tank called the Ratte, you know, which was a 1,000-ton tank.
Yeah, look at this. You can see the size of a man. What a huge monstrosity.
Here, take this, Steve, and I'll hold it and take a walk. Bye.
The team calculates the dimensions of the Rat from the original images.
Come on back, we'll do the other side. Left.
Left.
Straight across, I'll guide you over here.
Now they mark out an outline to compare the size of the giant World War II tank to a modern tank.
To the right a little bit, Steve. That's good.
Put next to a modern tank, the Rat looks massive. Weight, 1,000 tons. Length, 114 feet. And battleship-type guns. How devastating would such an enormous tank be in battle?
The Rata tank had such a large diameter projectile that its destructive force would have been absolutely enormous. Many, many feet of concrete, tremendous blast, tremendous killing power. But its mobility was so limited, you can't go down roads with it, and you can't go over bridges with it. And it might be able to go through a river, but who knows if it had enough displacement, positive buoyancy to stay on the surface and get across the river without becoming a submarine. So I think in reality it was more of a dream than everything else.
Finally, Germany's Minister of Armaments stopped the project because he deemed it ineffective at a time of disappearing resources. For Steve and Holger, the mystery remains. Did the Fritz X, or any other of Hitler's secret weapons, have the potential to change the course of war? A vast underground site, 330 feet below a hilltop, contains ammunition reserves, concrete gun shafts, and old railway tracks. A site reminiscent of a hideout in a James Bond film. But in 1943, Adolf Hitler ordered the construction of this secret Nazi gun site in northern France. The goal? To fire a shower of projectiles over the English Channel toward London.
Hitler was able to draw sketches, and so he was also interested in drawing plans for bunkers, for example, but also for big battleships and for very heavy guns. So he was indeed doing some work by himself with his own pencil for these special weapons.
Based on Nazi documents and Allied intelligence, this computer graphic shows the advanced design of Hitler's gun site in northern France. Never fully realized in wartime. The V3. V for Hitler's vengeance on London. Thin arrow-shaped projectiles were to be fired through a barrel whose projected length even surpassed Hitler's railway gun, Dora. Propellant charges were to be ignited as the shell passed lateral chambers, boosting it to an incredibly high velocity. For a maximum bombing range of 100 miles. On August 12, 1944, the U.S. launched a counter-operation off the English coast. Joseph Kennedy Jr., JFK's older brother, piloted a bomber headed for Hitler's cannon site. The plan was for the bomber crew to parachute to safety before the explosives on board detonated. But the bombs went off too soon, killing the entire crew. It was a tragic failure of U.S. intelligence. More than 4 weeks earlier, a British bombing raid already rendered the Nazi gun site useless. With their 6-ton tall boys, the Royal Air Force cracked the 18-feet-thick concrete slab containing the gun openings. One of the early British bunker busters landed directly on a gun shaft, creating extensive damage below. Today, a plaque commemorates Joe Kennedy Jr.'s courageous mission. Now, Steve Wiper and Holger Bull transport their 2 replicas of the Nazi bomb Fritz X to Chino Airport in California. They'll work with Aerotrader, a company which owns original World War II bombers and has experience test-dropping bombs from these planes. For Carl Scholl, who's been in the business of restoring World War II aircraft for over 30 years, the Fritz experiment is a first.
Maybe 200.
200, and we're going to have to ballast it to try to get closer to the real weight.
Exactly.
Okay, good.
This is our baby, RB-25.
We've actually used this thing in several movies. We've launched the airplane from a couple of aircraft carriers over the years, and now we'll get to drop a Fritz bomb.
Yeah.
That'll be different too. We've never done anything like that. We've dropped torpedoes and parachutes and parachute dummies and things like that.
But not German-guided bombs.
But no German-guided bombs, so that'll definitely be a first. Okay, well, we have a torpedo rack set up in the bomb bay, but I think with our configuration, with your bomb, the span on it is too large, so we'll leave the bomb bay doors off, which we've already removed.
Yes.
And then we'll have to come up with a configuration to attach the bomb to our mechanism and then come up with a suitable release mechanism, which we can do.
The Aerotrader crew modifies the bracket that holds the bomb. The replica Nazi bomb is much bigger than the torpedoes they dropped before. They calculate how much the Fritz X should weigh and where it should be centered, so that it drops correctly from the aircraft.
How critical is, like right now, because of this structure, it's off to the side a little bit. How critical do you think that is?
We must have both, because otherwise it could roll.
Okay. Yeah,
so we should cut that
we can
two times.
Cut in quarters.
Yeah,
sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, we can.
Put them on the sides.
Yeah. Put it up here.
Or put it up there. Yeah.
We're trying to get the center of gravity as close as we can to not only the dynamic center of gravity of this device, but also the aerodynamic balance, so that it's nose heavy enough so that when it leaves the airplane, the nose falls away. If it's not enough nose heavy, then the aerodynamic surfaces could potentially make it fly, which would give it a lift when it left the airplane, which would definitely not be a good thing.
The mechanics team tries different options and adjusts the weight of the bomb with great care. Still, pilot Carl Scholl has safety concerns.
We need the nose of this thing 100 pounds heavy, so that it definitely pitches down, because I don't want this thing going, trying to decide what it's going to do, because the center of gravity is neutral. I mean, it's definitely got to be nose heavy. Why don't we grab a handful of jump rotors or stators out there? Those things are pretty heavy. We bundle up 20 or 30 of those.
Let's have a look in here.
And bolt them in.
The debate about the bomb's ideal weight continues for 2 days.
Well, yeah, just the physics.
I want this thing to be nose heavy.
Yeah. Well, we're making it nose heavy, but 100 pounds is based on where in the moment off the center line. So we can put 100 pounds right here. Well, it's not making the nose.
Let's put the lead on the way you were talking about doing
It's not making the nose.
See what that does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the feeling. Yeah, that's true. What do you think about it? Probably after.
So you've got another. 50
Yeah, we're gonna add
50 more.
That's what we're doing. That's why we marked it that way.
Finally, pilot Carl Scholl is satisfied with the results.
Yeah, I'd be happy.
Right about the same place.
The bomb weighs close to 1,000 pounds.
I don't want this thing going through the air like this. I want it to definitely go down. That way we can have some control over where it lands. If it flies too much, then we don't know where it's going to go.
The team attaches U.S. Navy smoke flares to the bomb's rear to better monitor the flight of the Fritz X. They will conduct a safety test so the flares don't place the plane in danger.
Douse it now? Yeah, go ahead. Well, yeah.
The true destructiveness of Hitler's secret weapon may soon be revealed. Chino Airport, California. In just 2 days, an experiment team will test drop a reconstructed Nazi bomb from a B-25 bomber onto a replicated battleship outline. The crew wants to determine the ballistics and destructive power of the Fritz X bomb. The testing site is a remote part of the California desert, on the property of bomber pilot Carl Scholl.
Basically, this area, which is a quarter of a mile by half a mile, will be our drop zone. And what I'd like to do is set up the profile of the Roma, something like that, and be moving west to east and pick a point where we think we're going to hit the battleship, and that'll be our release point.
And then by having the ground teams back here kind of in a safe zone, that will help protect everybody from getting hit.
Tony Ritzman, flying the B-25 for over 30 years now, points out the risks of the bomb drop.
Once it falls free from the airplane, we don't know if it's going to pitch up and down, if it's going to enter into a roll moment, or quite conceivably it could even pitch up and start tumbling. And so the first 2 or 3 seconds of release are going to be a little bit of a risky event as far as maybe the Fritz hitting us.
In fact, the real Fritz X was so fast that it would have reached supersonic sound. That's why they had these roundish tubes at the end of it, you know, to prevent the supersonic sound speed, you know.
We're in the testing phase. And if you'll remember, the Germans used up over 600 of these devices just learning how to drop them.
Yeah,
and we're going to do it.
Let's not think too much about that. Yeah, that's true.
The team schedules a preliminary test drop of one of the replica Fritz X's for the next day. The German-American team reconstructed the Nazi bomb in a remarkably short time. With the engines of the B-25 bomber running, they conduct a test to prevent a potential disaster, the replica losing parts due to the pressure of the bomber's airstream.
Stand by to drop. 3, 2, 1.
The modified release mechanism works perfectly.
Well, we didn't really test it in the airstream. All we tested was the vibration factor with the engines running, but everything looked plenty stable, so I think we're good to go.
But the Fritz X was not the only secret weapon in Hitler's arsenal. Across the ocean in Germany, a seemingly innocuous peninsula in the Baltic Sea close to the Polish border. But in Nazi Germany, the area of Peenemünde was Hitler's high-tech rocket center. Secret operations started in 1936. Later, rocket launching sites expanded to a remote island off the coast. The world's first ballistic missile, Hitler's vengeance weapon, the V-2, took off from here. In 1942, the missile became the first man-made object to reach the edge of space in its trajectory. Today, visitors need special permission to enter the restricted area containing the ruins of Hitler's Cape Canaveral. The legendary Peenemünde also gave birth to another advanced Nazi rocket, the Wasserfall. The Nazis designed this single rocket to bring down a whole fleet of enemy aircraft. The plan was for the warhead to detonate inside of a bomber formation, and its special liquid explosive would create a devastating blast area.
The Wasserfall was really the first potentially effective surface-to-air missile that could have been widely used and very effective against bomber fleets. It really, of all the German weapons at the time, probably could have changed the course of the war in the West, possibly even a negotiated or a termed surrender.
But Hitler regarded defensive weapons like the Wasserfall as defeatist. He didn't see the point. Instead, he promoted the Vengeance and other offensive weapons up until the very end of the war. Now, over 6 decades after the first set of fatal missions of the Fritz X, the replicas of the Nazi bomb are ready for a daring test drop in a remote desert site. In a remote part of the California desert, at a former military testing zone, a daring World War II experiment begins. Holger Bull and his team test drop 2 replica Nazi bombs onto a battleship outline, marked in the sand. This outline is a copy of the shape of the Italian battleship Roma. In September 1943, the radio-guided bomb Fritz X hit the Roma and the cruiser USS Savannah in the Mediterranean. Now, the drop team intends to solve this mystery. Did the Savannah survive because the Fritz bomb was technically imperfect? Or was the German bomb too powerful for its time, ripping all the way through the battleships before fully detonating? The outline in the desert must be over 780 feet long and over 100 feet wide to replicate the original 1943 target.
Ask them more, Pete.
Naval historian Steve Wiper confirms that the target is correct.
So we're pretty close, right? Yeah, no, you guys have a good layout. There's a couple of minor adjustments, but other than that, it looks really good.
Yeah, tire. Go ahead and put them down. Here? Yeah.
The outline work on the ground is a race against time. The B-25 bomber is already on its way from Chino. This is only a scouting mission. The battleship outline has to be ready so that the pilots can gather important targeting data for the bomb drop scheduled the next day. The ground team finishes just in time. As the World War II bomber lands on the desert airfield, Holger Bull arrives with the special payload of the Fritz X bomb replicas. The next day will be the moment of truth. D-Day for the Fritz X. Will the experiment be successful? Holger Bull will be on board the bomber the next day, radio controlling the Fritz X. Aero trader pilot Carl Scholl gives some last-minute advice.
Look at the trajectory of the time that it was in the air, see if our drop point is correct.
Yeah.
Pilot Tony Ritzman calculates the probable acceleration of the Fritz X for the test drop during their scouting mission over the target area.
The bomb is going to travel about 2,300 feet before it impacts, and it's going to take about 12.5 seconds from the time of release until it actually impacts. And when it hits the ground, it's going to be going about 290 miles an hour.
But spotting the replicated battleship outline will be a challenge for the bomber pilots.
I was able to spot the outline of the Roma shape from a good distance, but because of the altitude we're dropping from, that disappears under the nose long before we reach the release point. So we picked a couple of landmarks way far out in the distance that will allow us to hold a constant heading and fly directly over the Roma shape.
The moment of truth is here. Everyone on the team works on their final preparations. For safety reasons, the replica's warhead is not packed with explosives.
Oh, you had it. What did you do? Right position.
Steve Wiper devises a special camera rig to better monitor the bomb's trajectory during the drop. The camera will be pulled away from the bomb by a parachute before impact to protect it from damage.
So we have a trigger that's released, that catches the wind or the air slipstream, and then that will pull the drogue parachute, which will in turn pull the main parachute, which will in turn yank the entire camera module off the back of the Fritz X, hopefully just before it hits the ground.
Now, the bomb and the bomber are ready for takeoff, and the first test drop of their Fritz X bomb on American soil. Pilots Tony Ritzman and Carl Scholl prepare to drop the Nazi replica bomb Fritz X from their World War II bomber. Steve Wiper leads the ground team in the target area. Before takeoff, Tony Ritzman holds a briefing on worst-case scenarios.
The moment of truth is about to arrive, so let's talk about what we're going to do here. We're going to climb out, do a 270-degree climbing right-hand turn, go about a mile to the west. First pass is going to be a dummy pass, just so that everybody is comfortable with the drop line, the run-in, your position.
When you're going to be dropping, so I'm going to hear that on the radio. Do you have a signal you want to give me?
Carl is going to start the countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, release. At that point, it's all yours.
Yeah, I realized that.
All right, let's talk about what can happen that can go bad. If the Fritz X really starts shedding parts, you know, the tail's vibrating or something really, really unsafe, I'm going to go out here and punch it off, okay? If we do the release and it doesn't release, I'm going to come right back here and land and hope it doesn't disengage when we touch down. Be the smoothest landing of my life. All right? If we have an engine failure, we're going to come back and land here. Don't panic. We've done this before. We can land on one engine. Other than that, we'll come back and then we'll do number 2.
Okay.
Any questions?
Pilot Carl Scholl feels confident.
All the times that we've been doing different drops, we've never had an emergency as such. Actually, I bet $100 that we will hit the ship.
As the pilots prepare for takeoff, the ground team heads to the battleship outline in the desert.
When I see you in place, we'll start rolling out.
Look a little more to your left. You see the orange? Oh yeah. The orange object, that's the stern.
The B-25 is not identical, but closely resembles the German planes that dropped the Fritz X during the war. The bombardier had to crouch in a glass compartment at the nose of the plane. Today, this will be the job of Holger Bull. It's his first ride in an American bomber.
Okay, Holger in the nose. We're rolling in.
I'm ready.
At first, the Fritz X replica seems stable, but then something goes wrong.
You just lost some parts, so you got a streamer coming out the back end of the thing past the tail of the airplane right now.
The increased wind resistance from flying could be disintegrating the replica bomb.
Wow, I see a parachute with the cameras.
All clear. The bomb body itself is still intact. It was the parachute of the camera rig devised to monitor the bomb that broke loose too soon.
Okay, so you're saying the parachute released, but the black camera body is still attached.
Looks like the black camera body is still attached.
Davey, copy that. The parachute mechanism fell off the back on the takeoff roll.
Yeah, I copy that. Apologies.
Okay, you should have the target inside, Holger. We're turning inbound now.
I will do my best to get it into the target.
When that thing drops, do not take your eyes off the Fritz X. Forget about the bomber, watch the Fritz X, because we are definitely in a danger zone here.
The countdown starting now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Release. Gone. I felt it go.
There it goes. Look at it.
Beautiful.
Look at that thing go. Here it comes. Here it comes.
Whoa!
Look at that thing go.
Whoa!
Look at that thing go. Whoa! Wow! Woo!
Wow!
That was perfect.
Okay, this is ground crew. Fritz X dropped beautifully.
It was perfectly controlled. Went into the ground somewhere about 50 to 100 feet short of the stern. Over.
Roger, we have that. Very good.
But it turns out the first replica missed the target by 100 yards. Still, this drop confirms the penetration and destructive power of Hitler's smart bomb.
Wow. And it, like you said, it was cooking.
Where's the front end?
It's buried way down in here.
The bomb's incredible acceleration almost smashed it into pieces when it hit solid ground.
Look at that.
I thought it
The edge of it.
When it first started.
Crushed like on a real crash of an airplane with high speed.
Where is the other one?
So this was a thing which was straight and fine. Now it's sharp like a rotten old knife, you know.
The team gathers reference data for their second and final test drop. This is their last chance to hit the battleship target.
There's the stern, right there.
I think we have a good idea of what happened and the glide path that it follows. So the next drop, we should be closer, if not be able to hit it.
On the second try, Holger Bull joins the ground team to observe his replica drop in person. In the cockpit, the pilots debate how best to readjust the release point for the Fritz X.
See, the tree line points right at it. No, it doesn't. The tree line is off to the left of it. That's the problem. Well, that's where we were. We're always to the right.
Finally, the pilots find their proper reference points for the bomb's release.
This looks better this time. Live run. 3, 2, 1, 0, drop. It's gone.
And this time, the smoke flare ignites.
Good. Okay, B-25 is going into land.
Again, the experiment proves the destructive power of Hitler's smart bomb. Over 7 feet of its total length of 11 feet are buried in the ground, even without the benefit of explosives. And this time, the Fritz X came even closer to hitting the battleship outline.
Steve, how far was it?
57 yards.
So our bomber crew really did a great job. Had this been underway at, a moderate speed, like approximately 20 knots.
Dan?
I think that there's a very good chance that this bomb would have actually hit the outline.
Well, knowing that in Germany hundreds of millions of Reichsmark, and the work of dozens of engineers, scientists, and so forth have been involved, So seeing all that, then I think we did a good job,
When the bombs dropped from the aircraft, they performed exactly as the originals did, and as they came down in their arc, it was like watching a movie of the real thing, except we were there to live it ourselves, and that was just fantastic.
The replica experiment unlocks the mystery of Hitler's secret bomb, Fritz X. The bomb's specific aerodynamic design is successfully recreated by the German-American team. The replica bomb's acceleration and penetration abilities are shown to have a highly destructive effect. Even without explosives, they almost completely disintegrate. Therefore, during the war, the Nazi bomb's penetration power was too strong for much of the battleship armor of the day. The USS Savannah got lucky. When a Fritz X penetrated her hull, it went so deep so quickly that the explosion went off too late to sink the ship. But if the Fritz X were perfected back then, could it have changed the course of the war? Toward the end, Hitler's weapons program became more and more desperate. In 1944, the dictator pushed for another last-minute weapon, the Heinkel 162. With a top speed of over 560 miles per hour, it was the fastest jet at the time. But the rush to produce these jets led to the deaths of many pilots due to mechanical failures. While preparing for the Allies' 1944 invasion of France, Hitler dreamed of crushing the ground troops with bombs like thunderbolts. But the Allies were able to jam the signals on the Fritz X. And on June 6, 1944, D-Day, Allied air superiority practically paralyzed the German Air Force. But what if the Fritz X was successfully deployed on the US troops approaching Omaha Beach, fulfilling Hitler's evil fantasies? A sinister scenario. Imagine hundreds of Fritz X bombs thundering down and countless US soldiers killed even before reaching the beach. Hitler's smart bomb might have turned D-Day into a doomsday for the Allies.